Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson, and a very warm welcome to episode 51, which is part 2 of exploring your cultural values. Now, if you missed out on part 1, don't worry, you can listen now and go back to listen to part 1 later on. I'll put a link in the show notes. But we're talking all about cultural values, which is such a huge topic. I've actually split it over these 2 episodes. In part 1, we talked about some of the reasons for understanding our cultural values, how the way that we interact, communicate, behave in professional environments is influenced by our own culture. And although we may not be very aware of our culture and how it influences us, it has a very strong impact in the way we make decisions, in how we communicate, in the way that we consider what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do. Now, when people have a good understanding of their cultural values, then it leads to very positive results for teams and their performance. It enhances collaboration, it builds great relationships, and ultimately very strong trust within the team, because people truly understand what motivates and drives people's behaviour and communication approach, even if it is very different from their own. But with teams that don't really understand their cultural values, this can lead to all sorts of frustrations and unconscious biases and judgments when people get frustrated with each other because they don't see that the way that others are acting is what they're expecting, even that they may consider it unprofessional or out of sync with their views on what is the right thing to do. So you can see how critical this is, particularly when you're working across borders with teams who are based in different locations, but also when you have your customers or partners in different locations, and they may have very different approaches to how to do a meeting, how to negotiate, or even how to make decisions. So last week we talked about the first 5 of these cultural values. Today we're going to talk about the 5 remaining of the 10 altogether. So really fantastic topic, loads to talk about here. But as I'm going through these, what I would love for you to do is just to reflect on which ones you think are your own cultural values. See if you can identify yourself in what I'm describing, and you might even start to recognize some patterns around others that you're working with. So let's jump in. Now, the first cultural value today is about context, direct versus indirect communication. Now, this is a topic I actually talk about quite a bit in my world, all about the style of communication. In direct communication cultures, they much prefer to say things openly. They say what they mean, which means you can pay attention to their words and you can interpret and decode what's going on. Now, this is true for positive interactions as much as it is for negative interactions. So there is a sense in direct communication cultures that if there was negative feedback to be given, that would be given directly and openly in front of others. In indirect communication cultures, this is not the case, as you can imagine. There is a sense of maintaining harmony and making sure people do not lose face. So this means that if there are any disagreements or conflict or negative feedback to be given, this has to be done separately and privately, not in front of the group. Equally, when it comes to expressing points of view, it's not only what's being said that you have to pay attention to, but you have to pay attention to all parts of communication. This might include what's not being said, silences which could indicate disagreement, the non-verbal communication, things like hand gestures and facial expressions, and even tone of voice, which can indicate what the true feelings are on a topic. So this is a really rich area, plenty to think about in this. The next cultural value is being versus doing. Now, this is an interesting question. It's about how do we feel about work? In some cultures, being cultures, they are working to live. In doing cultures, they're living to work. So both work hard, and that's really important to say. But in being cultures, there's much more focus on what happens outside of work. There is a sense that people have really strong hobbies or interests which are important to them. There are more firm boundaries between work and life. So that looks like work-life balance or an emphasis on well-being. And certainly strict boundaries when somebody is leaving work and they're not available. Now, in doing cultures, there's much more of a blend than blur that happens between work and life. Work is a core part of identity in these cultures, and people often work very long hours, and that spills into personal life on the weekends and in holiday or vacation time. But it's not just about work, it's also about what happens on the weekends in personal time as well. Often doing cultures have a sense of busyness in all aspects of life. So have a reflect, are you more being or doing? The next cultural value is universalism versus particularism. Now, you might not have heard of those terms before, but simply put, this is answering the question, what is fair in work? In universalist cultures, it is incredibly important that the same policies, terms and conditions apply to everybody, no matter what the situation is. There's a sense that what is fair is to treat everybody in exactly the same way. In particularist cultures, what is more important is to take into account the context and the people involved. This might look like flexing policies or terms for specific needs of groups. It might look like finding ways to accommodate special requests. And it might even involve, for example, thinking about how to give business to friends and family who are trusted. So think about whether you're more universalist or particularist in your cultural approach. The next cultural value is about expressiveness. Now, expressiveness is a fascinating one. It really is about how do we express our emotions. In highly expressive cultures, this is about demonstrating how strongly you feel about something and sharing openly your positive and negative emotions. It's very clear in expressive cultures how people are feeling through not only what they're saying, but through every part of their nonverbal communication. Their hand gestures, the facial expressions, the way they're holding their body language. And you're probably very aware that there are certain cultures that have very specific hand gestures to mean certain things. In non-expressive cultures, or neutral cultures, it's actually much more important to hide emotions and feelings, and it's seen as more professional to keep cool and calm no matter what the situation, whether that is positive or negative. What that looks like as well is that people use just their words to express themselves, and they very rarely show their feelings or emotions through their nonverbal communication. So you can see in this particular cultural value that if you had two people at different ends of this spectrum, how they might misinterpret each other and really make judgments on each other based on this. And then the final one is focus. Just checking which one it was I was going to get the last one. Focus. Monochronic versus polychronic. Again, you may not be familiar with these terms. Don't worry, I'll explain them now. Monochronic cultures are focused on doing one thing at a time. They like to take things step by step, and often in meetings, everybody is focused, present, and moving things forward, for example, through structured agendas. In polychronic cultures, there may be many different things happening at the same time. That might mean, for example, multiple priorities which change regularly, many projects being talked about in the same meeting. And in fact, in some polychronic cultures, that might mean, for example, in a meeting, many things happening at the same time, such as people emailing, even on having side chats, as well as the main meeting itself. The other area that this particular cultural value impacts is attitude to punctuality and time. Monochronic cultures are very focused on delivering on time, being punctual to meetings. In polychronic cultures, there's much more flexibility in time to allow for the changing priorities or things that might spontaneously come up. That means that there's less focus on being on time for meetings, that there's more flexibility in deadlines, for example. So there you go. Those are the 5 last cultural values. So as I was speaking, were you reflecting on this? Were you thinking about which ones sounded more like you and perhaps even more like your team members or people that you're working with regularly, your customers or partners? Where do you notice the similarities are? And where do you notice those differences? And how do you think that's impacting the way that you're interacting? I really hope you found this topic fascinating, and I would be really curious to hear about your thoughts on this topic. Which of these cultural values really strongly connect with what you think you are? And so please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you would like to take the cultural values assessment as part of cultural intelligence profiles, then please feel free to get in touch, either to take that for yourself individually or to do that for your team, so you can get your team view of who you are and what drives you as a team. I run these assessments very regularly, and they provide the strong insight and feedback that you might need to be able to work better together. They also are the foundation for understanding the training and coaching needs for your team and organisation. So if that's something you would love to learn more about, please get in touch via the links in the show notes. As we come to the end of this episode, if you have found this really interesting, and I do love this topic, then who else would benefit from this? Who else would find this fascinating and valuable to listen to? Please feel free to share this with a friend, with a colleague, with a co-worker. And if you found it particularly helpful for you, I would really appreciate it if you could just take a few minutes of your time to rate the show, leave me a review. And this really helps me to get this show out much more widely globally and in front of many more people. Thank you so much for joining me today on Cultural Communication Confidence, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time.